I'm Dr. Joseph M.T., Department of Sociology, University of Mumbai, and this is the E-Pathshala project on religion and society. We are in module 30 and we are looking at sectarian strife. Now, religions have a kind of way in which they get fissured or divided into different sects and different kind of denominations in that sense. And then what happens is, once these sects are formed, there would be certain kind of animosity that develops between these sects. Now, in this module, we look at how has this happened in Indian history and in the present day India. We look at the sectarian formations in Buddhism, in Jainism, and in Hinduism. For example, Mahayana, the Theravada, the different Jain sects, the Shvetambara and the Digambara, and in Hinduism, the Vaishnava and the Shaiva sects, and their animosity and their kind of relationship with each other. This is what we will examine in this module. Section 1: Sectarian Strife among Christians. After the establishment of Christianity in the 1st century AD, or the Common Era, the first significant series of differences known as the Great Schism of 1054 led to the first division in the Church between the Eastern Orthodox and Catholic churches. From 1524 to 1648, Europe was engulfed in religious wars with the onset of the Protestant Reformation. The Reformation brought in an enduring division of Western Christianity into sets of Catholic and the Protestant. Martin Luther started the Reformation with his work, the 95 Theses. Luther began by criticizing the selling of indulgences by the Pope. Indulgence is a way to reduce the amount of punishment one has to undergo for sins. He insisted that Pope had no authority over purgatory and that Catholic doctrine of the merits of the saints had no foundation in the gospel. While theological motivation was central in the critique of the Church, many other factors played their role in the Reformation. These factors included nationalism, the erosion of faith in the Pope, the perceived corruption of the Roman Catholic Church, the role of humanism, and the Renaissance that led to the questioning of traditional thought. The leader of the Reformation was Martin Luther, but his theological critique of the Pope and the Catholic Church was taken much further by the peasants and the lesser nobility in Germany. The Peasant War in Germany, as it came to be known as one radical attempt made by the peasants and nobles to re-establish the old Christian equality, which was destroyed by papacy and the existing Catholic Church. In The Pursuit of the Millennium, Norman Cohen writes about the Peasant War as a millennial movement whose leader Thomas Müntzer believed that he had been instructed by Christ to lead the faithful against the Antichrist, the Pope. This war was waged against feudal oppression, and the peasant warriors radically extended their movement for the reformation of the church into the reformation of the society in general. This created a conflict between the princes who formed the most powerful social class in the 16th century Germany and the lesser nobility and the peasantry. Martin Luther came out in support of the princes and denounced the war waged by the peasants. The war that began in 1524 was brutally suppressed in 1525 by the princes in alliance with the Protestant clergy and the emergent well-to-do middle class as the burghers. The Catholic Church responded with the counter-reformation, with Europe splitting into Protestant and Catholic regions. Central Europe was ravaged by 30 years' war. Conflict, often violent, between Protestants and Catholics had occurred throughout the history of post-Reformation Christianity. The case of Northern Ireland can especially be cited. The Irish Confederate Wars from 1641 to 1653 was both a religious and an ethnic political conflict. The primary question involved was who would govern Ireland. Related to this were the questions of which religious ethnic group would own landed interests in Ireland and which religion would be the predominant one. The Irish Confederates represented the interests of the Irish Catholic landed class. The Irish Rebellion was sparked off this long. War began in Ulster in October 1641, which led to the killings of Scottish and English Protestant settlers. With the overthrow of the monarchy and the beheading of Charles I, rebellion between monarchists and anti-monarchists in the English Civil War, the Irish supported the English royalists while fighting for their independence from England. The Confederates were finally, in 1653, defeated by the English army expedition led by Oliver Cromwell. Cromwell's army, under his explicit publicly announced orders, carried out massacres of Irish Catholic soldiers, priests and other Catholic civilians, deprived Catholics of owning land they were not allowed to live in towns, and were barred from holding public office except in the Irish Parliament. The wars between Ireland and English erupted in between, and the 1916 Easter Uprising led to the partition of Ireland into a free, independent Southern Republic of Ireland, while Northern Ireland remained under English rule. Persistent discrimination against the Catholic minority, led by the Protestant majority, and the dispute between the Catholics and Protestants over the political status of Northern Ireland led to a renewal of conflict in 1969. It is known as the Troubles. Violence escalated in Northern Ireland as a result of armed campaigns by the Irish and Ulster paramilitaries and by the British Army. The Good Friday Agreement in 1998 between the warring factions, leading to a decommissioning of arms by the IRA, brought in peace in the troubled region. Sectarian violence, however, still occurs in the forms of Paradesh in Northern Ireland. The Protestant Orange Order's annual parade is especially notorious in inciting violence against Catholics, since they celebrate the defeat of Irish Catholicism. Invariably, the Orange Parade leads to conflict when it passes through or near Catholic areas. The most contentious of such areas where the Orange Parade has annually passed through is Dumcree in Northern Ireland. Here, parading disputes have a long history going back to the 19th century. Refusal of the Northern Ireland Parades Commission to allow the Orange Order to pass through the Catholic Garvaghy Road led to a large-scale riots in the 1990s. Such parades and the trail of violence they leave behind remind one familiar with India, in particular with Bengal's history of similar patterns of riotous conflict. Section 2. Sectarian Strife among the Hindus. Since the days of Orientalism and Orientalist historiography, classical Indology had painted a portrait of Hinduism as otherworldly religion, concerned with the spiritual rather than the material. Max Muller is the best-known proponent of this classical Indological position that was greatly influenced by Romantic Orientalism. Max Weber too had theorized about Hindu religion following the Orientalist position. In arguing why, despite the existence of highly favorable material conditions for the development of capitalism, it did not emerge in India, Weber pointed out the otherworldliness of Hinduism, especially its theory of karma as the cause. In Western Europe in particular, in centers of ascetic Protestantism, the material conditions received stimulus from ascetic Protestantism. According to Weber, there was an elective affinity between the Protestant ethic and the spirit of capitalism. Weber's specific problem of investigation was why capitalism emerged in Western Europe, in particular in certain parts of Western Europe, and not in the Orient or the East like India or China. In focusing excessively on the otherworldliness of Hinduism, scholars have not given adequate attention to the political dimension of Hinduism. Focusing on its political aspect becomes necessary to balance gross inaccuracies that have been handed down to us as authentic history of Hinduism and India through history textbooks. In attempting the forging of a singular Hindu identity with an allegedly glorious history, cut short by Muslim rulers' dominant history writing, especially influenced by colonial and Hindutva ideologies, has led to erasures of historical events and practices. In studying sectarian strife, it is therefore important that we focus on sectarian violence in Hinduism. This will also help us to historicize the template of temple destruction by Muslim rulers as a political act in its proper context. Orientalism's approach to Hinduism was also informed by its aversion to Islam. Orientalism and classical Indology struck a chord with Brahmanical Hinduism. 19th century colonial history writing in India, especially James Mills's periodization of Indian history into 3 stages Hindu, Muslim and British, had an enduring impact on Indian history writing. Hindu historians and later Hindutva ideology took as foundational Mill's thesis that Hindu and Muslims formed 2 distinct communities and that they were perpetually in conflict. As Romila Thapar writes, Hindu historians, in complete disregard of historical facts, projected Indian history as one master narrative of Hindu victimhood and Muslim aggression. Among the foundational tales of such histories is that of associating Hindu temple destruction exclusively with Muslim invaders and rulers. From textual sources and inscriptions, Thapar demonstrates that destroying a temple was a demonstration of power on the part of invaders, irrespective of whether they were Muslim or Hindu. We choose to forget that there were Hindu kings who destroyed temples either willfully, as did Harshadeva of Kashmir, to acquire the wealth of the temples, or as part of a campaign, as in the case of the victorious Paramara Raja, destroying temples built by the defeated Chalukya. Thapar asserts that temple destruction was not merely an act of religious hostility. Temples were certainly places of ritual space and had a religious identity. But royal temples were also statements of power and were surrogate political institutions representing royalty. They were repositories of wealth and centers of finance. They maintained social demarcations through allowing some castes to enter the temple but excluding others, and they were the cultural nucleus of at least the elite groups of a region. Temple destruction and its aftermath, therefore, calls for historical explanations of a wide-ranging kind. It cannot be made the justification for destroying or threatening to destroy mosques, churches in the present day. Rivalries between powerful Hindu sects such as Saivites and Vaishnavites, and between Saivites and Buddhists and Jains, leading to violence and destruction of places of worship, have been a part of the history of Hinduism as well. Saivites are those who worship the god Shiva as the creator, revealer, concealer and destroyer, and adhere to a non-monastic way of life. Vaishnavites venerate Vishnu and promote the importance of Vishnu and his 10 avatars. Kalhana's Raj Tarangini refers to the rivalries and hostilities between Saivite sects and Buddhist monastic orders. Evidence of violence and use of abusive terms between Saivite and Jaina sects can be found from the inscriptions from South India. In fact, as the recent Nashik Kumbh Mela incident shows, this rivalry still continues. The conflict came out in the open when the Vaishnava sadhus refused to participate in the flag hosting ceremony marking the beginning of the Mela on 14 July 2015. The Kumbh Mela, scheduled to begin on Tuesday in Maharashtra's Nashik district, is caught in a conflict after the ascetics of the Vaishnava sect decided to boycott the flag hosting ceremony and proposed to hold a separate one. While the sadhus of Triambakeshwar, who are Saivites, have agreed to take part in Tuesday's flag hosting ceremony, those of the Vaishnava sect in Nashik say they will have their own on August 14. These reports explain the history behind the current conflict, a bloody conflict in 1790 between sadhus of the Vaishnava and Saivite sects over who would have the right to take the first holiday claimed the lives of 12,000 ascetics. This bloodbath had forced Peshwa Savai Madhavrao to limit Vaishnavas to take the Kumbh deep in Nashik, while Saivites were limited to the distant village of Triambakeshwar. As another report stated, this year too, the ancient quarrel had a rerun, with Triampak priests and Nashik sadhus tussling over a flag hosting ceremony. Romila Thapar in her works has pointed out the presence of Guru Peer traditions, as well as the formation of sects out of an amalgam of existing sects of various kinds such as those of the Bhoras, Khojas, Mapilas. Each sect adopted local customary rituals and beliefs and even family forms. The Mapilas adapted the matrilineal form from their local caste equivalents, which were in divergence from Arab Islam. However, dominant history writing has tended to suffer from selective amnesia that helped the portrayal of religious communities as monolithic. Studying intra-sectarian strife allows a far more appropriate reading of multiple identities of communities, their beliefs and practices, and their politics. At the same time, selective readings of history that tend to sweep away all contentious and contradictory processes and practices into singular communal entities must be resisted. Sectarian strife among Muslims. Strife between Islam's two biggest and most well-known sects, Sunni and the Shia, date back to 1632, the year of the Prophet Muhammad's death. The question of who would succeed the Prophet as the religious and political head of all Muslims led to a split within the community into two sects, the Sunnis and the Shia. The majority who later formed the Sunni sect backed Abu Bakr, who was the father of the Prophet's wife Aisha. The others backed Muhammad's cousin and son-in-law, Ali, as the rightful heir. This minority came to be known as the Shia. Though Abu Bakr's supporters won Ali could rule briefly as the fourth caliph, Ali's reign was marred by civil war. The caliph, the title that was given to Muhammad's successors, was the spiritual and political head of the Muslims. Ali was assassinated in 661, and his sons Hassan and Hussein were denied what Shia considered to be their legitimate right to succeed Ali as the next caliph. Hassan is believed to have been poisoned in 680 by Muawiyah, the first caliph of the Sunni Umayyad dynasty. In 680, in the Battle of Karbala that took place in the Islamic month of Muharram, Ali's son Imam Hussein was killed by the reigning Sunni caliph's army led by Yazid. These events gave rise to Shia concept of martyrdom and rituals of grieving. Shia Muslims commemorate the month of Muharram, reimagining and reenacting the Battle of Karbala and reaffirming their faith in the Islamic principles that Imam Hussein and his followers gave their lives for. While they share many fundamental beliefs and practices, these two sects differ in doctrine, ritual law, theology, and religious organization. While Sunnis stress the primacy of the Sunnah or the Prophet's teachings, the Shia follow their Ayatollahs, the sign of Allah on earth. This has led Sunnis to accuse Shias of heresy. Likewise, the Shia point out that Sunni dogmatism has given rise to extreme forms of Puritanism that find their expression in extremist sects like the Wahhabis. Most Shia sects believe that 12th Imam Muhammad al-Mahdi is in occultation and would one day reappear to restore divine will on earth. Shia Muslims are in majority Iraq, Azerbaijan, Bahrain and Yemen. They form a substantial section of Muslim population in Afghanistan, India, Saudi Arabia, UAE, Kuwait, Qatar, Syria, Pakistan, Turkey and Lebanon. The Shias form around 10% of the Sunnis, and the Sunnis account for 85 to 90% of the world's Muslim population. Shia-Sunni strife has become especially frequent since the 1979 Islamic Revolution in Iran, where the Shiite clergy set on a radical Islamist agenda that was perceived as a threat to the conservative Sunni regimes of particularly the Gulf region. Ayatollah Khomeini is a rather ambitious move, declared himself as the spiritual leader of not just the Shia but of the entire Muslim world. In connection with this, we may mention the strife that has marked Shias and Sunnis in India. Hassan says that while till the mid-19th century, North India, in particular Lucknow's Muslim culture had the hallmarks of a composite one characterized by interreligious mixing, by the end of 19th century Shia-Sunni conflict came to mark the region much more than the Hindu-Muslim strife. In 1906, the construction of a separate Karbala by Sunnis at Phulkatora, opposite the existing Talkotora I, and the public praise of the three caliphs Abu Bakr, Umar and Usman led the Shias to engage in a vilification campaign against the Sunnis. The Sunnis retaliated by declaring the observance of Muharram as heresy, the appropriation of certain symbols and simultaneous rejection of others, which together had earlier formed a composite culture, went a long way to destroying the very foundations of Shia-Sunni harmony. Hassan also identifies a more powerful cause for such a strife. It appeared in the form of religious revivalism affecting Hindus and Muslims, Shias and Sunnis, Deobandis and Barelvis. The large-scale attempts by the Hindu organizations to establish Hindu hegemony over Indian society caused Muslims to expose similar goals. In relation to the Hindu other, the meaning of being a Muslim was translated through the late 19th century religious and political idioms. While this was the dominant strain, it also caused, due to factors mentioned above, the discovery among Shias and Sunnis new symbols and practices that would allow for their existence as separate entities. Purificatory moves common to all forms of religious revivalism now became a central form of battle between Shias and Sunnis, each accusing the other of being corrupted by the incorporation of Hindu beliefs and customs. With the demand for a separate Muslim nation becoming more strident, political leaders and the British government advised both Shias and Sunnis to bury their animosities and come under the banner of one identity, that of being Muslim. The migration of both Shias and Sunnis in large numbers to Pakistan created only momentary peace. There in Pakistan, Hassan shows the conflicts emerged with greater intensity. On August 14, 1947, Pakistan was born on the principle of Muslim solidarity, but its rationale is tested year after year as the Shias and the Sunnis continue to fight each other on the streets of Karachi and Lahore. In this module, we have looked at sectarian strife. Sectarian strife refers to the kind of animosity and conflict that have developed between people belonging to different sects within one religious community. And these have been very popular or very common in different parts in India in different ways. We have looked at these plurality of sectarian strife. Thank you.